Hello, everybody, and welcome to the McLuhan Institute Live number 11, the Finnegans Wake edition. Last week's broadcast was fraught with technical difficulties, so we'll see what happens here if it goes smoothly, and so far, so good. We'll just keep recording, otherwise I'm going to stop it and just record on my phone and upload it later. But it looks like it's going well. Somebody's already here with me, so let's go. This is the Finnegans Wake edition, which I hope isn't, I don't know, don't expect too much because I'm not nearly a Finnegans Wake expert. In fact, I'm sure people who are watching this know a lot more about Finnegans Wake than I do. However, that said, I'm just starting with this book because this was the last book I was inventorying, and there's a picture of it up on the McLuhan Institute's Instagram page, and it's somewhat germane to this discussion because what this is well, it's an incredible book for one thing. It is a new and complete French and English and French dictionary on the basis of the Royal Dictionary, English and French and English, compiled from the dictionaries of Johnson, Todd, Ash, Webster, and Crabbe, blah, 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 printed 1854. And what's interesting about this is it says, to Eric from, quote, Dad. So this was a gift to Eric McLuhan from Marcia McLuhan. However, in the back here, it says to Eric McLuhan on his 2nd birthday. 1944, what you gave your 2-year-old, apparently, if you're Marcia McLuhan, is a crazy old French-English, English-French dictionary. It is a fine old book, lovely marbled papers inside, and in pretty good condition for being a leather-bound 150-plus-year-old book. And that comes into the discussion because we're here to talk about not only James Joyce's book Finnegans Wake, but Marshall and Eric McLuhan. And speak of the devils, there the guys are right there. There's Marshall and Eric, who's a young boy there. Serious business. There are so many things to say about Marshall McLuhan and James Joyce in Finnegans Wake. Marshall once called his work many things, including a footnote to the work of Harold Innis, but one of the things he called in all seriousness his work is applied Joyce. And that wasn't just a casual comment. Back behind here we have some works by a guy by the name of Saul Field, who was in the McLuhan orbit. And these are his renditions of the 10 Thunders from Finnegans Wake, or parts of them. I don't know if I have the complete set. I've got half a dozen of them anyway. What put me on this path to talking about James Joyce today was these 3 books here. And this is a very handsome leather-bound, green leather, gold leaf edition of Finnegans Wake by James Joyce. And they're specially made with these lovely shamrocks stamped in for Eric McLuhan. And what's neat about this edition is that it's interleaved with blank pages. Every other page is blank. So you have printed page, blank page, blank page, printed page, printed page, in order that Eric could make notes. There's an exact same set with Marshall's name stamped into it. The irony of it being that neither Marshall nor Eric made any notes in these editions. I guess they found them too nice to mark up. that didn't stop them from marking up every other edition. Again, there's a photo of this on the Instagram page, but here's the UPS lading bill here. It says, from John Culkin, 75 Horatio Street, New York. Father Culkin, the Jolly Green Giant, as they called him, I guess, to Eric at 13826 Lillard Lane, Dallas, Texas. And my father and my mom were living in Texas at the time, while my dad pursued his PhD in English literature. And his thesis was on Finnegans Wake. Here's the thesis here. Giant thing. Menippean Thunder at Finnegans Wake by Eric McLuhan. That is a tome. Again, I posted pictures of this on the Instagram, or on the Facebook page, I think, including the first two pages, which is the abstract talking about Joyce as a menipist. Joyce has not hitherto been discussed as a menipist, yet at least Ulysses and Finnegans Wake are Menippean satires. The purpose of this study is to show that Finnegans Wake belongs to the Menippean tradition of writing, and to examine its 100-letter thunderclaps in that light. Its peculiar language and style are not unprecedented, they are necessary Menippean techniques. Menippean satire has been variously defined by the formula, quote, a mixture of prose and verse, etc., etc. Talks a little bit more. And this was submitted in 1982, approved by the examining committee, University of Dallas. Degree of Doctor of Philosophy in English in the Institute of Philosophic Studies, University of Dallas, which is pretty cool. From this giant tome, we get two things, sort of. One is this book, Eric McLuhan, The Roll of Thunder in Finnegans Wake, which is, I suppose, a condensed version of that giant thing. And this is Eric's copy. There's a note in here from the publisher. There was, anyway. It's just an invoice. Oh, that must be the other one. This was published 1997, so it took a while to get it published, but I guess that was the thing to do, was get your thesis published. So there are those, and then there's this book, which was even more recently published, called Cynic Satire by Eric McLuhan. And that's apparently Menippeus himself floating around the cover there. This was published by Cambridge Scholars Press just a couple years ago. When was it? 2015, 4 years ago. And this is Cynic satire is about it's another name for Menippean satire, the school of the Cynics. And this talks more broadly about the form of Cynic or Menippean satire, and all various kinds and their properties, and what isn't Menippean satire. Very cool book. Costs a lot of money. It's like $100 a copy, which Dad was really upset about, but he didn't set the price. Anyway, I'm just grateful it got published. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but since I seem to be going backwards, here we have 2 copies of Finnegans Wake. I think these are the 8th edition. This is part of Eric McLuhan's library. These are his copies of Finnegans Wake. This says T. Eric McLuhan, November 10th, 1961, Malmstrom Air Force Base, Great Falls, Montana. Yeah, Dad was in the Air Force. He was an American citizen, and he enrolled in the Air Force. And apparently he got this book while he was there. And this book, I can't even, it's kind of fragile, so I don't want to handle it too much. But it is full of notes, very heavily annotated. Let me give you a little bit of an example there. Here we are. Just lots and lots and lots of notes and included papers. Let's see if there's anything. He really broke this down. The interesting thing with these books is seeing how he revisited them. The same goes for Marshall's library. There's some of the end paper there. And the second copy here, being careful because dust jackets are fragile. Same thing, very, very heavily annotated and broken down, and there's circlings and underlinings and coming to the margins and to the back page and inside, and so Marshall, I wish I knew the story of how he came across Finnegans Wake in the first place, but he came upon it very early on. Pretty sure it was serialized first before it was ever published in book form. James Joyce released it, I think, in a newspaper or something, a chapter at a time, something like that. And there are apocryphal stories about Marshall and a friend reading Finnegans Wake to each other in a bar, and but it's really interesting because Marshall McLuhan brings up Finnegans Wake all over the place. I don't have the evidence to back it up, but I'm pretty sure it's by far the most referenced book in all his works. He mentions it everywhere. Like I said, he said that his work was applied Joyce. And I think that is noteworthy. And it's something that you don't hear discussed very much, but I have no idea why not. And it's worth somebody taking a hard look at. Marshall in his library has, I lost track, it's been a while since I looked at it, but at least 4, maybe 5, plus the special edition there, maybe up to 6 copies of Finnegans Wake, and they're so heavily annotated. What would happen is he would fill all the margins in the front and the back papers of an edition and run out of room, so he would buy a new edition to mark up, and he literally filled like a half dozen copies of Finnegans Wake with his notes, which is remarkable, and definitely worth looking at if you want to understand who Marshall McLuhan was and how he did what he did, because it's no coincidence that Marshall was an English literature prof for his entire career. And you can't disregard that if you're interested in how he did his work in understanding culture and technology. Dad told me, and I've also heard this elsewhere, that he and Marshall would read Finnegans Wake to each other in the backyard on summer days, and they just jammed it back and forth. And not last summer, but the summer before, Dad and I did the same thing. Sorry, I'm about to sneeze. Here on the porch of the scriptorium, we would drag some chairs outside a few times and read Finnegans Wake to each other. And of course, I regret not doing it more, but I do treasure memories that we had. And I understand that one of the keys to encountering Finnegans Wake is to read it aloud and to put on those voices, because it's a multi-level wordplay, and you don't get the same sense of it reading it silently to yourself. Dad once told me it was basically a teaching aid for training your perception. So, and he also said that basically once you read Finnegans Wake, you're ruined for your life. That you'll never look at words the same way. And I think that's certainly true in my case, even though I haven't spent a lot of time with it. And maybe I should make a point of dipping into it a little more. But it's all about playing with language. And the fact that Dad did his PhD thesis on these 10 words, just 10 words in the book, which are 100 letters long, is kind of amazing. I also wish I had a recording of the Dad, because he could recite these thunders just off the top of his head, and like they're 100 letter long words. It was a remarkable thing. In any case, I'm sure there's definitely a lot more to say on the subject, but that's for another time. And that'll do it for this edition of McLuhan Institute Live, number 11. Thanks for being here. The McLuhanInstitute.com will lead you to Patreon, Facebook page, Instagram, all that stuff. Thanks for all your support. Peace.